Right. So the question would be this: who would have access to the knowledge if Muhammad was literate or not? Who would have that access? Who would know that?
Well, the people around him.
Right. Would people in Persia know it?
We have many recordings of what happened at the time of the Prophet that are what we would call embarrassing or negative things that don't necessarily serve a purpose but have been recorded anyway. So an example would be we have a recording of a manuscript of the Quran or a page of the Quran being eaten by a goat, for example.
Try and address that.
Sure.
First off, I don't think there's any evidence the universe had a beginning. What there is evidence for is that there was a Big Bang. No, I didn't say that. It might have always existed or it might not have, we don't know. There's no firm evidence that it had a beginning.
All right. So you don't know. So if someone to believe it had a beginning,
yes,
it's fine. Do you believe the universe has always existed?
I don't know. No, I believe, I don't know.
So what I'm hearing, and I could be misrepresenting you, so tell me if I am, is that we've got no idea about the beginning of the universe.
They're opposing each other.
Exactly.
So you reject the theory of relativity?
No, I don't know. You're treat quite a person. You're treating
Once you learn something here, the man is an expert. You are not. Listen to what he's saying.
He's not saying anything. He said I don't know.
So what I've understood is that the more that you're learning, the less that you know.
When did time begin?
Well, we don't know. It may have never begun. It may have always been there.
You're disrespectful. You don't really know a lot, do you?
These are side topics. These are really side topics, I think.
Yeah, these are side topics.
I agree.
What's your name? Sorry.
Imran.
Imran. I think it would be good if Imran and I could focus on the issue at hand, because these are side topics and it's easy to get.
But I want to just address a couple of things.
Because I think we're having
just want to say a couple of things, because I think I understand why the brothers are sort of all joining in, because they're feeling a little bit buttons pushed.
Yes.
And I want to say that even if you don't have and I completely agree with the brother's position about language and context and commentary, but even if you don't have the commentary, the verse that you quoted about kill the unbelievers where you find them, if you start from what it talks about, it's actually talking about a specific treaty with a specific group of people that was broken, and therefore, and it's nothing to do with religion. So this is not so you can't
actually
compare.
Actually, the polytheists, not
sure, the mushriks, the polytheists. And so this was related to that specific treaty, and the command to fight them was after that treaty was violated. And that's irrespective of religion, really. It's not to do about whether they believe as Muslims or not. So, and the idea. So I don't find those two verses contradictory. But we would. I was just talking about humans. You know, how the fact that in a history, most of us have been, as human beings, we've been theistic.
Yes, I agree with that.
And then we've become atheistic.
Not necessarily monotheistic.
Sure. Sure. So there's been a concept of something beyond human beings that has translated into sort of human being sort of experience. And there's been claims from many different societies, many different cultures, in many different times of people who've had communication and then afforded that.
Yes.
Now, this is a trend that's gone on, and it's sort of few people even today make the claim.
Yes.
But what this shows actually is that we need to account for this experience.
I agree.
So this is an observation of something.
I agree.
Now, so dismissing this concept, I think, out of hand that these texts are is problematic. I think we should assess them and look at them and see what we come out with.
Sure.
And one of the things that you said about the Quran specifically was you said that it was written by men. And it's a common, accusation made against the Prophet that this was something compiled together. But actually, I think historically, it goes against. There's history that goes against that idea. And the main reason is actually because the Quran itself asks people to write something like it. And forget the challenge itself, but just look at what happened historically. All it would require was for somebody of that time to say, well, here we go, this is something like it. And it would have ended the religion, completely finished it.
Would it?
It would have completely finished it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't accept that.
Sure, I understand that.
I don't accept that.
Sure, I understand.
First off, people don't change their religious beliefs in the face of contradictory evidence. We see that people that join doomsday cults, and they predict the end of the world, they give it a certain date. Yeah? And when that date happens and the world doesn't end, do you know what happens? They don't say, I was wrong. My belief in my cult figure is ended. They come up with some rationalisation why they were right all along. Yeah? So I just don't agree that claim is valid, because people don't change their beliefs based off of conflicting evidence.
So then
their belief systems are much more complicated.
So what that answer that you've given assumes is that there is evidence of people producing something similar.
I'm saying is if there was, it wouldn't change their beliefs. So I don't believe that the religion would end if someone came up with that.
So in the time when Islam was sort of literally in its fruition, there were handfuls of people who were receiving these words from the Prophet that they recognised as being something different from their usual sort of way of speaking and doing poetry, etc. At that time, when I think that there would have been, because we have examples of people at that time walking away from the religion, we have examples of that. So I agree with you. As a group, most people tend to sort of blindly follow, but actually there are many that don't.
Sure.
And I have friends who are examples of that, sort of coming from atheistic backgrounds or religious backgrounds and changing religions, or leaving religions.
Yeah, people go both ways.
Both ways, yeah. So I think that historically, because that rather than try to meet this challenge, the people actually fought the Prophet. They drove him out of where he was, and they went on to have many battles. I think historically, what that shows is that what he had wasn't something that could easily be reproduced. That's my perspective.
That's fine. Something not easily reproduced is fine.
Sure.
He could have been a brilliant poet, speaker. None of that means that it was given those texts by a being that's so powerful or righteous. He could have been given it by an alien, for all I know. It doesn't follow that the fact that it was somewhat unique doesn't mean that it's from a God that has all those properties.
So absolutely. So I agree what you're saying, but what I would say is that the fact that the Quran was something that wasn't easily reproduced by the people at the time. So I'll just use that phraseology just to make life easy.
Fine.
And the people fought the Prophet rather than to try and meet this challenge, they fought against him. And what this shows actually, they were unable to meet that challenge. For me, when I'm looking at this, and the fact that this text itself makes certain claims for itself. One of the claims it makes is about the Prophet, peace be upon him. Anyway, it says that he was illiterate, which is actually something that's historically sort of recorded and valid as far as we're aware.
I mean, I've tried to look into that. I can't say I'm an expert on this, but I haven't found that there's the historical validation of that claim that Muhammad was illiterate is very strong. I mean, tell me what you think the best evidence is that claim is true, because from the reading I've done, I've not seen anything particularly convincing.
So how would you approach that sort of question?
I would look for historical biographies of him done by clearly non-biased sources, and I don't see that. Go ahead. You want to say something?
Can I just weigh in?
Of course.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, 6:30 is when I have to go.
Okay. Same over here.
I'll just wrap this up.
Right.
You seem a little bit similar. Yeah, but anyway, so the Sahaba, the companions of the Prophet. For example, if all of you guys know me, and I tell you that I'm the Prophet, and I tell you that, for example, you clearly know that I know how to write. You know how to write.
That was the point I was going to make.
Yeah. Would you risk your life in all these battles where you're the underdogs? Would you actually risk your physical life and everything based on that whimsy claim?
A claim that you know is false.
I think you could claim. I totally believe that you could risk your life for something that you know to be false. I don't think it's unlikely at all. You might believe if you believe that it's going to lead to a better world, you will certainly risk your life for a lie. I don't see why you wouldn't. That's all it requires. All it requires is some ideological motivation to fight for that cause. You might fight for that cause because they're paying you. You might fight for the cause because you think that this person is an inspiration, or you might fight for the cause because you think it will lead to a better world. And you'll quite happily fight for a lie if you think. Like people do it all the time. Proper people, ideologies like Nazism and communism, they've done things they know are lies, but they believe in their ideology and they fight. They risk their lives for their ideology. So I don't see why that's an argument.
And en masse as well. But like you said,
most of the people thought Muhammad probably didn't know him personally.
Then what you said,
probably only had a small circle of
he said earlier, Phil, is it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Phil said earlier that you would need it from non-biased. But I would humbly claim no one's non-biased. Yeah. Like, for example, a Christian is not going to be non-biased.
Well, that's the difficulty in believing the claim.
I'm not going to lie to you, a Muslim is not going to be non-biased.
There are, okay.
But atheist is not going to be non-biased. So who's going to be non-biased? Because look, if
If, for example, No, you can. Let me explain, right? There are certain claims, right, that are accepted in a conflict by both sides. Okay? So, for example, take World War II. Okay? Both sides of World War II, the Allies and the Axis, accept the claim that the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. Where they would disagree is whether it was justifiable. But they both agree that Pearl Harbor was bombed, right? So if you have a scenario like that, where multiple sides in a conflict agree on certain facts, then that gives you a validation that those facts are likely to be true. So what you would want to see is contemporary people who were not followers of Muhammad, maybe his opponents, who agreed with that claim, and I haven't seen that. I mean, if you know of that, I'd be happy to read it and examine it. From what I've read, I've not seen that.
Then we have
sorry, go on. Yeah, so we have historical. So when I say when you're assessing any sort of historical events, particularly about a civilization, and you got to remember that Arabia was in between the Romans and the Persians, and didn't really have a written history or any sort of written system as such that was sort of books.
Well, they had writing.
They had writing, but they didn't have.
I'm not quite sure what you mean. They have no writing.
They didn't record their history as such. And actually that's something that happened even after the Prophet's time, when actually the Quran came, and that was something of a driver of writing and recording, and books really became proliferate after that. So when you're assessing history, actually what we do is we go to those people and we see what they say. This is what we do. And then you look for, if you're then going to change, revise that understanding of what these people were like from their own history, you look for evidence that contradicts this from other sources. So we have in the Muslim recorded history, which you could say is biased, but we have recording of companions who were doing the writing for the Prophet because he couldn't do it. We have for example, there was a treaty being written, and between a disbelieving group and the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the person who was writing the treaty put down, this is the treaty between the Prophet, the Messenger of God, and and the person objected and said, no, well, actually, I don't believe that this person is a prophet of God, so I'm not going to agree to this treaty. So we have recording of the Prophet.
Do we have recordings by the opposing side?
So the person who then later became Muslim affirms the story, but at the time he wasn't.
Later became a Muslim.
Later became Muslim.
So that's not really an unbiased source.
No, I'm not saying unbiased source.
Do we have an unbiased source?
So what I'm saying is that when you do history, you don't go to. First, you look at the people's history that they record for themselves.
Sure.
And then then what you do is, if you want to revise your theory, if you want to say, actually, however these people that have recorded their own history isn't correct, because we have other evidence that suggests, then you would revise your theory.
No, but we have to treat claims skeptically. Otherwise, we fall for anything.
But we don't.
Okay? And it seems to me that this claim is not being treated as skeptically as it should be.
The
claim is that the Prophet was illiterate.
You don't believe the Prophet was illiterate?
I'm not saying I don't believe. Well, I'm saying I haven't seen sufficiently unbiased sources to verify that claim.
So you don't know.
So I don't accept it. I'm not saying it's false. It might be true, right? But I don't accept it as true.
So you basically you don't accept anything unless you've seen it yourself? What?
No, of course not. I accept it based off. I accept claims based on the proportion of the evidence for it.
Do you have any evidence that says he wasn't illiterate?
No.
So why would you oppose him?
Because you don't accept things. Okay. I don't have any evidence that there are no aliens on Mars. But I don't accept. If someone here said there are aliens on Mars, I would not accept that claim, even though it might be true. Right. Even though, and I don't have any contrary evidence that it's false. Unless you can bring the evidence to the table, I'm not going to accept.
So if
that
someone
claim.
makes a claim there's aliens on Mars, would you say there's not aliens on Mars?
No, I don't make that claim.
You say you don't believe it.
I say yes. I don't accept the claim to be true.
You don't believe it. That's the same thing.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
fine.
Because you have no evidence.
But it's not the same as me saying it's false.
No. I agree. Okay. So what you're saying is this. So someone comes and claims there's aliens on Mars. You've got no authority to say there is no aliens on Mars unless you can prove there's no aliens on Mars. Correct. All you can say is I don't believe it. Yeah?
Yes.
Alhamdulillah. So when the Muslim comes and says that we believe the Prophet Muhammad was illiterate due to what we have, you have to question why you don't believe that.
Yeah, because I told you why.
No, why don't you believe that? Why don't you believe their testimony?
I told you already.
Why?
Because they're not unbiased sources.
No, but why? So what?
because that's what you want in history.
So this is what I'm saying to you.
But if you don't
that
have
approach to history is
exactly what you explained to you. If you have a contrary to it, you're right. So if, for example, you have Islamic sources saying Muhammad was illiterate, and then you have pagan sources saying no, he was writing books. He was a poet. Yeah. We're not. Listen to me. What you're saying is someone's come with a claim that he was illiterate, and here's why we're saying he's illiterate. Now, do you understand what a belief is? Yeah, a belief is the acceptance of something to be true with or without evidence. Okay, this is what a belief is. All right. So we believe Muhammad was illiterate, and the reason we believe it is this, this, and this. Yeah. You have to prove that even if it's biased, even if it's written by the people who wrote the history because they were there. Listen, they were there. Why are you rejecting that just because it goes against you?
No, it's not just because it goes against me. You can't accept any claim made by people just because they were there. Right? Okay. People lie, people make mistakes.
And people tell the truth.
Yes. Right. So you don't know a priori which one of those three is the case.
No, but the question...
Right?
Yeah, but
so you want to try and assess which one of those is true. Is it
how do you do that?
How do you do that?
Yeah.
If you want to know whether a claim is true in history, you look for multiple sources.
Right.
And you look to see, are there clear biases on the sources?
No.
And if there are clear biases on the sources, you raise your level of skepticism.
Right. So the question would be this: who would have access to the knowledge if Muhammad was illiterate or not? Who would have that access? Who would know that?
Well, the people around him.
Right. Would people in Persia know it?
I don't know. Depends what interactions they had.
Well, if they never met him, would they?
If they hadn't met him, they wouldn't know.
And would people in Rome know it? In Egypt? Right.
No, of course.
So the people you would expect to tell you about how he was are the people around him.
Right, but they're also the people...
But what you're trying to say is they lied.
No, I'm not saying they lied. They could be mistaken. It could be a legend made up later. Right. I'm not saying the people around him.
Or they told the truth.
That's a possibility as well.
Right. Now the question is.
Let me address this point. There's no assessment that they necessarily lied. The people come to false beliefs by all kinds of manners. Right. It could be legends that developed over time. It could be mistakes. It could be exaggerations. It could be mistranslations. It could be an outright lie. Right. Or it could be the truth. Right. Okay. Now, if we only have the biased sources, the ones that you would expect to try and paint someone
biased.
Okay, because in history, if you have a claim from someone who's clearly biased, then you have to treat that claim with more skepticism than someone that doesn't have a clear bias.
But everyone's biased, though.
No. But as I said, sometimes the bias doesn't matter. Yeah. Okay. So, for example, if in the case of World War II, right, if both sides agreed to certain things,
but you're not presenting. No. Because you presented Pearl Harbor, and the Allies believe this and the Axis believe this. Okay, but you're not doing the same with this. You're not bringing us an alternative view.
Oh yeah, true.
No. Okay.
Didn't nobody write against?
Didn't you just tell me that writing wasn't very active in that period of time?
Right.
Okay. So therefore, it's very difficult. No, the problem is it's very difficult to test this claim whether it's really true.
Right.
I'm not saying I've got lots of evidence that it's false.
Right.
I'm not saying that.
Right.
So you're saying, well, bring me some evidence that it's false.
No.
And I don't have any.
No.
But I'm saying is that it would be it's hard to assess whether the claim is really true. Because as you said, there wasn't a lot of writing going on at this
time. Can I ask you a quick question?
Right?
Earlier when you were talking about, for example, aliens being on Mars or something like that.
Yes.
And you said if someone made that claim, you wouldn't... But what I would say the difference between that and this claim is, for example, great claims, like something so crazy, of course you're not going to accept by someone just saying it. Yeah. But the Prophet, when most people back then were illiterate, being illiterate, that's not a crazy claim. So what you did
obviously some people were illiterate because it got written down, right?
For example, what you did, for example, is like, if you tell me, if I didn't know this area and you said Edge Road's that way, that's not like a massive claim. That wouldn't be a claim that would really shake everything, right?
Of course.
But what he did, instead of doing that, he was...
No, but the claim is... Look, let's get down to the bottom line of this. Let me get to the bottom line of this.
It's a basic claim. It wasn't a claim.
Fine. It's not, because what you're saying is that a literary masterpiece was written by an illiterate person.
So that's not what we're saying, actually.
No, Phil, no. We're not saying that at all. what we...
That's a subtle point.
Sorry, Imran, sorry, hang on, sorry.
Okay. Can I just... Me and Imran were having this chat. What was the claim you... maybe I misunderstood the claim you made. So why don't you repeat the claim and we go from there?
I said that you said that the Prophet Muhammad or a group of people wrote the Quran.
Yeah. That's your claim.
That's how you put it. And I said I didn't agree with that. And I said I was giving different reasons for that.
Right.
Now, amongst the reasons was that the Prophet was illiterate. And then we went into the question of history and how we do history. Right. So, in talk about early sources, we have, first century Qurans that contain the statement that this was, if you were one who could write with your hand, then the people would not have believed. This is sort of a quote from the Quran itself. Right. And when the Quran was in its fruition, literally, when there were handfuls of Muslims only, and I know that you said that people believe things blindly, but when the people who were coming to believe in this gentleman, at a time when he was saying things against their culture, their belief systems, were people who were looking for reasons to sort of say this is a false person, don't believe in him, partly because of sort of clan rivalries and everything else. There were people who said, we did this and that clan did this, and now they're saying they've got a prophet. Why can't we say the same? These were the sorts of thought processes going on. No one refuted the fact that he was illiterate, or said actually, no, you're not illiterate.
You don't know that no one refuted that. That's a claim you've made.
We do.
There could have been plenty of people refuting that, and
you're arguing from silence.
No,
I'm saying you're arguing.
I'm arguing from silence.
Sure. I would say that they...
It is.
Sure.
Maybe I could finish my sentence. Yeah? You're saying you're making a claim that we can't really check, and so we don't know that it's true.
So I can... There's a response to that.
Okay.
So I agree that if just because something isn't said, it doesn't prove that it didn't happen, unless you expect it to have been mentioned if it didn't happen. And what I mean by that is, we have many recordings of what happened at the time of the Prophet that are what we would call embarrassing or negative things that don't necessarily serve a purpose but have been recorded anyway. So an example would be we have a recording of a manuscript of the Quran or a page of the Quran being eaten by a goat, for example. It has no real significance overall because the Quran was a memorized text, but it's recorded. So we have not a lot of, unquote, sort of inverted commas, banality recorded. And then we have extensive life stories of the Prophet, peace upon him, what happened to him, also recorded. And they record all the things that happened, the accusations that were made against him, and the Quran also reiterates some of these, that it claims that this person was doing these sorts of things. None of those, amongst those claims, does it claim that this was someone actually who was lying, who was a writer who was lying that he couldn't write. So it's a claim. It was something that we expect to find, but we don't find it.
Here's the point. They may have some conception of the story they want to tell. Okay. I mean, I'm not saying this is what happened. I don't know, right? But it's certainly conceivable, right, that they had this conception of this image that they wanted to portray, and it suited them. Right? And other things, embarrassing things, they didn't find them to be a serious problem. Otherwise, they would have cut them out. They say, we can allow this, but we can't allow this. That's certainly more conceivable than an all-powerful, all-knowing, all-loving, not all-loving, all the 99 properties of God gave someone a supernatural book.
Sure.
So if you ask the probability of those two explanations, to me, the human one is a much more reasonable one. Because we've only got 15 minutes left.
Sure.
So why don't we do one of these two things? The very first thing that you said was, I believe there's a creator. So why don't we, in our last 15 minutes, maybe we go 2 minutes each or something, just give me the best reason you think there is for believing that there is a creator to the universe.
Okay, so that's a complicated question, but I'll do my best in the short time.
I just think we've only got 15 minutes left. Let's move.
So I believe that the universe, you're the science guy, I'm not very as a science as you, but evidence points towards the fact that the universe, if you go back in time, was smaller than it is now, so it's contracting back over time. And this goes to some point where we lose sort of our current understanding of physics, which is pre-Planck time.
Yes, sure.
And I believe that because we look at the universe now and it's expanding at a faster and faster rate, that it's unlikely that it's going to be a universe that collapses. So it's going to be going on for that. And if we look up now, we can see stars.
Yes.
That means that we haven't been expanding forever, because otherwise the light wouldn't come to our eyes, because the acceleration would also mean that we're at a stage where the light wouldn't come to us, so we just see a black sky.
That's not quite right.
Okay, that's my understanding.
Yeah.
So
you're giving the Olber's paradox.
Sure.
But that doesn't work in an expanding universe. So Olber's paradox doesn't work.
So because of all of these sort of things, I believe the universe has an origin point.
Okay.
I believe that there was an occasion or a circumstance in which there was no universe.
Right.
So I don't believe the universe has always been there.
Right.
And I don't believe in infinite regression. You've probably come across this before. Therefore, there has to be a initiating cause, an uncaused cause, for example. If we do a conceptual analysis of that cause, if it's something that's already existed for eternity, it can't be mechanistic, because then we would have lots of universes popping out all over the place, even overlapping with ours. Maybe we don't see why that wouldn't be the case. It would be a non-mechanistic thing that would indicate some sort of choice to make a decision to call it universe. So therefore, would have a will.
Right.
And therefore, and also then to make the universe, it would have to have at least an equal amount of power or matter or energy as the universe itself.
Yeah.
Cause and effect, if we say is conserved, let's say conservation of energy. So a powerful thing that is not the universe, so isn't matter and energy, that has enough energy as the universe itself. Similar to the Kalam argument.
All right, so let me try and address that.
Sure.
First off, I don't think there's any evidence the universe had a beginning. What there is evidence for is that there was a Big Bang. But was the Big Bang really the beginning? Well, it's certainly true that there are singularity theorems proven by Penrose and Hawking, and I've worked with Penrose and Hawking, so I know a little bit about this, that say the universe had a beginning at the Big Bang. But those theorems have assumptions. One assumption has already been shown to be false, and that was shown in 1998 with the acceleration and expansion, because those singularity theorems assume gravity is always attractive.
No,
dark energy shows us there is repulsive gravity out there. Therefore, the assumption in the Penrose-Hawking theorem we know to be false. Okay, so straight away, what we used to think the Big Bang was the beginning, now we can't say that. Also, as you kind of alluded to, our current understanding of physics breaks down at the Planck time. That's true. It doesn't follow from that the universe had a beginning. Right?
No, I'm just saying
that people have tried to construct what are called quantum theories of gravity, and there are many attempts at this: string theory, loop quantum gravity, Java gravity. What's interesting is that all of them seem to point to a pre-Big Bang universe. The universe was contracting before it was expanding. Okay, and so that tells us we are not in a position to say the universe had a beginning. So that assumption of the argument doesn't seem to be correct.
Well, so you don't believe?
No, not according to me. According to the scientists like Roger Penrose, Stephen Hawking, and other scientists.
So you don't believe the universe had a beginning?
Correct.
You believe the universe has always existed?
No, I didn't say that. It might have always existed, or it might not have. We don't know.
You don't.
There's no firm evidence that it had a beginning.
All right. So you don't know. So for someone to believe it had a beginning,
yes,
it's fine. It's their opinion. It's fine.
Yes, but it's not very compelling. What Imran said was that the science was pointing in that direction, and I'm saying the science is not pointing in that direction. The science is.
Do you believe the universe has always existed?
I don't know. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't.
All right, but if the universe has always existed, then you'd have reason to believe that, isn't it? I think that's what you know.
No, I believe. I don't know.
I'm asking what you know.
I don't have a belief.
Well, you do.
I don't.
Well, you either accept something to be true or not.
I don't. No, but that's not the same.
It is.
Okay, it isn't. I think the universe may or may not have had a beginning.
Right.
And I don't have a belief either way. I will wait to see if strong evidence comes in favouring one statement over another, then I will believe.
So
but right now, there isn't any firm evidence either way, because we don't have any observational evidence for anything that happens in the Planck era. Okay? So we don't know what happened. And current attempts to do quantum gravity all point to the universe existed before the Big Bang. But they don't have experimental evidence, so we don't know if they are right. But they are our best candidates at the moment. Okay? So we don't know whether the universe had a beginning. Even if it did have a beginning, causes, all our experience of causes is, causes happen before their effects. Okay? So if the universe had a beginning, there was no before. And therefore we're not in a position to demand there must be a cause.
Even if there was
you've given lots of you've given lots of. So
sorry, Imran, go. Why don't you respond to those two?
So you sort of made lots of.
Okay, let's go with those two.
Sure,
one, science doesn't really point to a beginning, and two, even if it had a beginning, we can't be confident. Of
so what I'm hearing, and I could be misrepresenting you, so tell me if I am, is that we've got no idea about the beginning of the universe.
I would say we have lots of ideas, but no firm evidence that one of them is right. We do have quite a lot of ideas.
So you don't know.
Okay, so so really you're coming from a place of a lack of firm knowledge. It's just these are theorems that mathematically work, but nothing actually empirical to sort of evidence.
Yes.
Okay, so that's one. So saying that we don't know, I don't think is a good argument against our understanding that actually that everything points towards some sort of beginning, some sort of start.
But what is pointing to a beginning? I don't. At least scientifically, what?
So the fact that the universe contracts to an origin point.
Well, it contracts to a very dense point.
Yeah.
But that's not an origin point necessarily. It's only an origin point if you believe a singularity theories. But as I've said, those singularity theories, none of the people that wrote those theorems down, Penrose, Hawking, believe the assumptions of those theories anymore. They don't apply to the universe as we observe it.
They shouldn't bring up a singularity. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
So atheists, just so you know, there's no singularity. Okay, carry on.
It's not that there's no singularity.
You believe there's not?
No, I don't say that. Pete, stop putting words into my mouth. I don't say there's no singularity. I'm saying the theorems that say there was a singularity are not reliable. They are good pieces of mathematics. The conclusion follows from the assumptions, but the assumptions are now no longer firm. Particularly because we found this repulsive gravity. But even if you forget that assumption, there's another assumption that we believe that general relativity describes the universe in the Planck era, and that's completely unreasonable because quantum effects are bound to take a role in the Planck era.
So do you reject general relativity as well?
I don't reject it from the most part, but I do reject it as a description of a quantum era.
No,
and no one in cosmology.
They're opposing each other.
Exactly.
So you reject the theory of relativity?
No, I don't know. You're trying to put words.
Once you learn something here, the man is an expert. You are not. Listen to what he's saying.
He's not saying anything. He said I don't know.
Okay.
You hear what you want to hear. As usual.
Stop putting words into my mouth. I don't reject general relativity. General relativity is an incredibly accurate, brilliant theory, but it is not necessarily applicable in the Planck era.
Right.
Therefore, my question to you is, I think your statement that everything's pointing to an origin point, I don't accept that.
So what I've understood is that the more that you're learning, the less that you know. That's really what I'm hearing. I'm not hearing anything more than that. And I'm saying that's an unreasonable position to be in as human beings, because we are rational and we do apply a rationale to even things that are not empirically observable. We do this all the time.
Yeah.
So for me, let's say intuitively, I think that the universe couldn't have just been around forever because of the many things that I've mentioned before. But also intuitively, it doesn't make sense to me. Okay. And when I then look at within the universe, see, there's another point that you mentioned that I've forgotten now that I'll probably come back to.
So there were 2 points. Yeah. One is science doesn't really point to the Big Bang being the beginning. I wouldn't agree that it's the more we know, the less we know. We've learned a lot. We've learned there was a Big Bang. We didn't know that, right? But what we now think is that the Big Bang was not necessarily the beginning. Okay, that conclusion is no longer the consensus view in cosmology today. Okay. So, and the other point was, even if there was a... Okay, go ahead.
So the question, so what was the other point? What was the other point?
The other point was, even if there was a beginning, causality happens, things that have causes that we understand have prime moments in time. We've never seen a cause that didn't have a prime moment in time. So if there was a beginning to the universe, there wasn't a prime moment in time. So we don't really know what causality would even
we don't understand it.
Sure. So what I would say to that, it was when I used my words, I was quite specific. I said there was a circumstance in which there was no universe.
Okay,
so I was trying to avoid time language because I understand what you mean.
But time is a property of the universe. So.
Sure, of the universe. But there was what I was saying, there was a circumstance in which there was no universe. So that would mean before time and before space. And I think that, and therefore, so whatever caused that universe, the causal mechanism is beyond our understanding of causality as we know. But it originated the universe, and therefore we have what we have now. Now, that's one concept. So I believe that the universe did have a beginning, even though all of these theories are sort of being put forward as muddying the waters until we have more firm understanding.
And can I ask, do you accept my point that the science isn't really pointing
sure.
to everything?
I have,
you do accept
sure.
that? Okay,
But my view on science is probably slightly different to yours.
Go ahead.
The underlying basis of science is that there are no non-natural causes, so it precludes any hypothesis or theories that go beyond the nature itself. So it's sort of self-limiting in its conclusions, and that's probably, from a theistic perspective, a downfall. So with that understanding, I know why you say what you say, because that's the limiter that's been put on you, that you have to find a natural cause. And which is why we're going to go around in circles a little bit. We're not going to get to the nub of this, because I'm positing a supernatural cause, and that doesn't fit into science model. So we're not going to agree. That's too big a bridge to sort of gap. The other thing that I see actually is just to what we see sort of in the universe itself, sort of the organisation. I know these are sort of, you understand this.
Yeah.
The argument for the fact that the fine-tuning, for example, and I know that you have views on this as well.
Sure.
But actually, other things. For example, if you look at sort of the how frequently mutations occur to organisms or DNA to bring about evolution. Because I don't deny evolution exists, that just the mechanism is the issue. If you look at that, and we look at the time span in which there would have been evolving proteins on the universe, the diversity that we see is not explainable in the time frame that we have, from my perspective. Okay. So that's one. So I think that we haven't got good explanations for the diversity of biological matter. Okay. Looking at the time frame that we have for biology to have evolved so far. The other thing that we have many things that are not reducible, in my view. So consciousness, for example, it's not reducible down to any particular area of the brain, even.
I agree with that. I agree with that.
And I think these when we look at the basics of
basically fine-tuning, evolution, consciousness,
and and rationality is an a priori assumption. Okay. I think we can't just make that a priori assumption to then do our rationality. Okay. We have to explain that.
Okay. Let me try and address those four points in a short series. I mean, we can do this again. This is a great chat.
Sure.
Okay. First off, on fine-tuning, I think fine-tuning is a very bad argument for theism. And I'll try and give you it's a long topic. We won't have time to go into too much detail. First off, we don't know that the universe actually is fine-tuned, because there are lots of papers actually disputing this, and we can't do an experiment where we change a constant of nature and see what will happen.
Sure.
We can't even predict from the constants. If I gave you the laws of nature and the constants, and I asked you to predict, does our universe have life in it? You would predict that it doesn't, because you would say the matter and the antimatter would annihilate, and we would live in a cold, dead, sterile universe. So you would get a false negative. So if we get a false negative for the one universe that we can observe, how confident should we be for the gazillion other universes that you cannot observe, right? Not very confident. I'm not saying fine-tuning is wrong, but I'm saying we don't really know it to be true. Okay? Second off, let's suppose it is true, okay? So this claim is that our universe is very unlikely. Yeah? So it could be, there's plenty of good non-theistic explanations for that. One, it might be that the constant nature is just necessary, that it couldn't be any different to what they are, therefore they are not improbable. Or it could be, if you come up with any improbability thing, it could just be you rolled the dice loads of times. So we could live in a multiverse or something like that. And the multiverse is actually a prediction of inflationary cosmology. It's not an ad hoc add-on to try and deal with fine-tuning. It comes out of inflationary cosmology, which is our best and consensus view of how galaxies form. So this looks like a better explanation, okay, than a being that doesn't have a mind or a brain, doesn't have a brain, a physical brain, but does have a mind, okay? Lastly, it's a bad argument in theism. There's a very good, I recommend you read this guy. His name is Hans Halvorsen. He's a professor of philosophy of physics, but he's a theist. And he's going around saying, theists, please don't use the fine-tuning argument. It's a bad argument for theism. And his argument is this. It's a good argument for deism. If you're a deist, you should use this argument. But theism makes the claim that God is the source of all things, right? And God must have fine-tuned the universe because he wants life. He wants a life-permitting universe. So he's fine-tuned the constants to give us life. Okay? Why is that a bad argument for theism? Because under theism, God is the source of not just life, but the probability for life. That's down to God too. Now, why would he make the probability? If you think he's a life-loving being, he wants life in the universe, he could have made the probabilities for life to be high, but he's made them low. And the analogy that Hans Halvorsen gives is, imagine you've been kidnapped by aliens, right? And they make you play Russian roulette. And you play Russian roulette, you pull the trigger, and you survive. And your hypothesis as to how was it that I survived this unlikely event is that the aliens were benevolent. They wanted you to survive, so they rigged the game to make it so that you survived. Then you look at the chamber. And what do you find? You find there were bullets in all of the chambers. Does that fact alone confirm the hypothesis that the aliens were benevolent? That fact alone does not confirm that. That's disconfirmation. So for theism, fine-tuning actually turns out to be a bad argument because it's predicated on the fact that there's some probability that's outside of God's control that he has to sort of compensate with his tuning. Do you see what I mean? Like if you have a radio, that only a tiny dial on the radio has the signal that you want, yeah, an intelligent being could fine-tune it. But only because there's all this static on the radio. Well, why is there all the static on the radio? Why didn't you just make a radio where every bit gets a signal? You see what I mean? So it's a bad argument for theism, and particularly if you believe, as you said, this seems to be where the contradiction lies, that you're sort of doubting evolution can come out with a complexity. But
I'm not.
No? Sorry, I thought that was your protein argument.
I'm saying that
sorry, then I misunderstood you.
Sure. So.
Okay.
You've mentioned lots of things. I haven't mentioned them because this is your time to talk. So,
yeah,
but I won't go into all of that. But just to sort of I'm going to try and go backwards because I'm going to forget the
We've got to finish up soon. Yeah.
So the idea that because we're in a life-permitting universe, just to use that phrase,
sure,
that this doesn't, and if we say that this was fine-tuned by God, means that there's lots of other universes where God was unable to fine-tune it.
It's not that he was unable to; it's that he sets the probability. Maybe a different analysis. Sorry, I shouldn't. It's that, not that.
Okay. Go ahead. He sets the probability, or
sorry,
he sets the probability.
He sets the probability for life. Okay. Yeah.
So in this universe, we're making the assumption that the probability of life is low.
Yeah, that's what the fine tuning is. Right.
Sure. But I think that there is life here, and there is no reason to assume that there's not life anywhere else in the universe, because actually the probability is that it's probably quite good that there is life elsewhere.
Yeah, I agree.
So this universe is a life-permitting universe, and we don't. Yeah. This is a big thing to say, but we don't see any evidence for other universes.
I don't agree with that.
Sure. Okay. Mathematically,
I think there is some evidence. It's not compelling. It's not strong enough to say yes, I believe. Sure. I don't believe. Sure. But there is some evidence, and that's the evidence for inflationary cosmology.
Okay.
But go ahead.
Sure. In the model there is. Is that what you're saying?
It's to explain. Most models of inflation predict that there's a multiverse, and in fact there are certain models of inflation that have what's called a flat potential. And those models are favoured by the data, and Planck satellite can say flat potentials for inflation are favoured by the data, and those models produce a multiverse. And I think therefore there is some evidence. It's not enough to be compelling, but it is suggestive. So I say there is some evidence, but it's not enough to be sure. Yeah, as far as I don't call myself a believer in the multiverse.
Sure, I don't know enough about physics, but as far as I know, there's no empirical evidence that there is anything.
But that is empirical evidence. You make maps of the cosmic microwave background. You then compare what properties the CMB has compared to what models of inflation, and those models of inflation that predict a multiverse are favoured by the data. That's what Georges Staffio told me. I interviewed him. He was the guy that gave the Planck data at the ESA conference. So he was the top guy on Planck. I interviewed him, and I asked him this very question: can Planck, you know what Planck is, right?
Yeah.
The Planck satellite. Yeah. I said, can Planck discriminate between inflationary models? He said yes. I said, does it favour models that are a multiverse? He says yes, absolutely. And he even said that's our most important finding.
Okay, so that's a whole other can of worms. Because if there are multiple universes everywhere, then obviously, however these are produced in whatever mechanistic way that they are produced, because according to science, it would be mechanistic.
Yeah, it's produced by inflation.
Sure. Then the fact that we haven't collided with another universe at some point already is, very. If you have millions and millions of these or billions of these universes.
But they're in space that's inflated,
sure.
So they're very unlikely to collide. Yeah, it's possible we could have collided in our past, and we might see a bruise or something. but there have to be, you know, a lot of conditions for that to happen. It has to be, the rate of inflation has to be such and such.
So just understand, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm learning.
go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
You said there's billions of universes in a space outside of this universe, all inflating, and yet they're not colliding. Use that as an example, because he said, why have we not collided with one, isn't it?
Yeah.
And you said they're all in space expanding. So
it's inflating. It's not just expanding.
No, inflating.
So inflation means accelerated expansion.
Inflating within what?
It's the space itself. It's not within something. Space itself is inflating.
No, but if this universe is inflating,
yeah. No, ours isn't.
It's not.
What we mean by inflate, well, yeah, it's undergoing a very low power.
Is our universe inflating?
Expanding.
Well, when we say inflation, okay, let's try and define our terms.
Oh, let's say expanding.
Let's say no, because these things have to be explained carefully. A bit. Okay, so inflation is a period of rapid expansion, where the rate of expansion is exponential. And it doubles in size in something like 10 to the minus 37 seconds.
Wow. So there's billions of these things.
Okay, now what happens is, let me try and explain it. So what we think is that in the early universe there was a period of inflation.
In this universe?
Yes.
Big Bang?
Yes. Right. But this inflation, when it decays, so there's a patch of space that's undergoing inflation.
Right.
And we do have evidence for this. Okay? And when this patch decays, it heats up the space. It creates matter and radiation. Okay, all the matter and radiation comes from the inflating space decaying. Okay, and it decays with a half-life. Like everything radioactive decays with a half-life. So if you have a patch of radioactive substance, all right, let's just say you're eating. A good example is a cake. It's not radioactive, but this is the example I use in a radio show. My mum makes this amazing chocolate cake. It's really, really nice. Yeah. She puts the cake down on the table, and about half the cake goes straight away. We all eat it. Okay. Then when we go back for seconds, there's no cake left. We've eaten all the cake. So that's like radioactive decay. You go from carbon-14 to carbon-12. Eventually, there's no carbon-14 left. It's all carbon-12. Okay? But in inflation, things are different. Why? Because the patch that hasn't decayed is undergoing exponential expansion. Yeah? So the amount of stuff, amount of inflating space is always increasing. It's never going down. So it's like when I went back for the cake grew. Therefore, how many pieces of cake am I going to have? An infinite number, because of the...
I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, that's fine.
This is a tricky question. Rob thinks I'm doing tricky stuff. I'm not.
So the no, I know you're not. I'm trying to explain it as best as I can.
So is the universe like a balloon expanding?
A bit like the balloon. Right. It's not exactly the same. The analogy, there's no interior. Like a balloon has an interior.
No, forget the interior. I'm not interested in the interior.
Yes, it's a bit more like a cake being baked.
Well, let me talk about the balloon. I like the balloon.
Yeah. Okay,
so the balloon's expanding. I forget what's inside it.
Yeah.
What's it expanding into?
We don't know is a short answer. Right. But okay, there's a couple of levels to that answer. One is it's expanding into inflating space, if inflation is true. Okay, but in general relativity, it doesn't need to expand into something. Space itself has the property.
No, which is fine.
Space itself has the property that it can.
So where are these other universes?
They're in the inflating space.
They're inside the same universe?
Yes.
Really?
You could, the term universe and whatever sort of become difficult to understand. It's inside the inflating space. The inflating space is everything.
So this multiverse, okay.
Yeah,
all right. So
it's all inside.
Wow.
So this inflation is ongoing in other patches. If you think of the universe as everything that exists, our little patch.
How does that work with the singularity? Just so I understand.
Okay, so what happens is the singularity is a point in time where the space-time, curvature, density, pressure all go to infinity.
Right.
And that is inevitable, assuming certain things. And one of the assumptions is that gravity is always attractive. But in inflation, like with dark energy, gravity is repulsive. So that would... Now, hang on, I'm trying to answer the question. So that would remove the Penrose-Hawking singularity. Now, there's another singularity theorem called the Border-Guth-Vilenkin singularity theorem, which holds even if there is repulsive gravity. Yeah. However, what I've interviewed Alan. Now, a lot of theists have made a lot of noise about this theorem, proving the universe had a beginning. And I interviewed Alan Guth about it, and he said, no, it doesn't prove that.
Right.
Okay. Okay, go on.
No, because you completely confused me. What's the universe according to you?
What is the universe?
Yeah.
I don't. The phrase universe can have different meanings.
What do you mean? What do you believe it is?
Well, you could define it in many ways. I mean, one way to define it is sorry.
Come this way, folks.
Sorry. So one way to define it is the observable patch that we can see, and that's about 90 billion light years.
So
across
when you say that, you see, we believe the universe is everything.
Well, you could define it that way. You could define it that way. There's different ways of defining the word universe.
Because I'll be honest
things
with
can get confusing because people use these terms differently.
So here's what I'm trying to understand now is according to what you're saying, the universe expanded, and if this multiverse is true, these other universes are expanding within this universe.
Yes. If you
at the same time.
Yes.
At the same time.
Well, at the same time doesn't have a meaning in relativity, because in relativity, there is no at the same time. Time is dependent on observer, and so I actually asked Alan Guth this question. He is the inventor of this inflationary cosmology.
Didn't time begin when the universe expanded?
Not necessarily, no. Time could have... That's if the singularity is true, yes. But the singularity may not be true. In fact, most people don't think it is true. In which case, no, time didn't begin with the universe expanding.
It didn't? When did time begin?
Well, we don't know. It may have never begun. It may have always been there.
Not disrespectful. You don't really know a lot, do you?
We've learned a lot, but that opens new questions.
Every question I've heard you be asked, we don't know.
There are lots of things we know. The universe is expanding, right? We know there are other galaxies. We know there are black holes.
The universe is expanding.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, it depends how you define expanding.
Do you think that the universe itself is quantized? Is quantized or not?
I think it's not inevitable, but it's likely. I think it's likely to be true. Well, I interviewed Roger Penrose. He has a theory now. He came up with the singularity theorems. They're called Penrose-Hawking theorems. And he now no longer thinks there is a singularity, and he doesn't even think that we need quantum gravity at the origin of the universe has been there forever.
Like this?
Not necessarily like this. It changes. It undergoes evolution.
Was it smaller than this?
Depends what you mean by small.
Because you just ruled out the singularity. So
Okay.
If something expanded, at what point how small was it?
Yeah, well, that's a confusion of language. When we say the universe is expanding, it has a very particular meaning, and it's not necessarily the meaning that you have in everyday language.
Well, going back to your original point.
Okay. Let me just answer that question about expanding. What do we mean by expanding? What we mean is the distance of distant galaxies is expanding. Okay, it doesn't mean everything is getting bigger or smaller, and the universe at the Big Bang could have been infinitely big, right? What we mean when we say the universe is getting bigger is that our observable patch of the universe is getting bigger or smaller. But the whole universe could be infinitely big, in which case it never got bigger or smaller. It's just our patch that got bigger or smaller. Does that make sense?
Well, I was under the impression that the universe is everything that exists.
It depends how you define the term universe. You can define it that way if you wish.
But I've realised now, maybe the problem I've had with atheists for so long is that our definitions are different.
Yes, because you can define universe in at least three different ways.
So I'm defining everything that exists, and you're defining the universe as the patch of space we can see.
I'm not defining the universe that way, but people can define it.
What are you defining it as? That's what you define.
I'm happy to go with. I don't care how you define it.
No, I want to know how you define it, though.
I can define it in different ways.
Well, define it in the way you believe it.
No, but I don't know. Honestly, all right. There's different ways you can define it. You can define it as the patch of space that we can see.
Is that how you define it?
No.
What do you define it?
I don't know. I don't know what the right definition is. It's a confusing word, right? Okay. Well, I'm happy to use either definition as long as you're clear as which definition you're using. To me, that's the important thing.
Well,
so in the context of what you're saying, be clear about what you mean, right? So now we know.
So you don't know what the universe is.
We do know that the universe has to be bigger than our observable patch.
But we don't know what we're talking about.
Now, hang on. This is one thing. You say we don't know a lot of stuff. One thing we do know is that the whole of space-time must be bigger than our observable patch, because we have made measurements of the curvature of space-time, and we don't find any deviation from a flat universe. So it's either one of two things, and this must be true from the measurements that we made. It's either infinitely big, or it's finitely big, but way bigger than what we can see. Okay,
so that would rule out the definition that the universe is just the patch we can see, then, isn't it? Surely.
You can define words however you like.
No, but you have. Look,
I don't think it really matters what word you use as long as you know what the definition.
If I'm defining all of it, and you're defining a piece of it, then of course it matters.
Well, if there's one,
but if I'm defining all of it, multiverse doesn't make sense. Unless these other universes are outside of the universe.
If you define the universe as everything that exists, then multiverse does not make sense. Agree?
Of course it doesn't.
Agreed. But when you use the word multiverse, then the phrase universe isn't referring to that. People use these phrases interchangeably, and I agree they're lazy when they do so.
It doesn't work that way, because a multiverse is more than one universe.
Yes.
So if I believe the universe is everything that exists here, then according to this idea...
What do you mean by here? You see the confusion arises
I believe everything that exists, isn't it? As a universe.
Okay.
Everything, all the galaxies.
Okay. So, all right.
So if there's more than one of those,
when we say multiverse,
I'm just saying.
What we mean? Hang on.
Yeah, but that's what I'm just. Sorry, Phil. So it is Phil, isn't it?
Yes.
I keep calling you Phil.
Yes. And your name is, sorry?
Darren. Yeah. So this is how I've seen it. Because when you say that if I believe the universe is all time and space, that's the universe.
Yes.
And you're saying that a multiverse is more than one of them, then there must be another one occupying somewhere else.
Okay. When we say multiverse,
I know now. What I'm saying, this was my understanding.
That's wrong.
So now going back, the way I've defined universe is not the same as your understanding universe, but you don't accept the definition of a patch of space. Yeah. Right? What we can see. You believe the universe is bigger than that. Is that right?
Yes.
Do you believe the universe is infinite?
I don't know. It might be, it might not be. I don't have a firm belief. It might be, it might not be. We don't know.
Which side are you leaning on to?
Does it matter?
I don't think it matters. I don't
Does it matter if the universe is infinite or finite?
It matters for what?
Matter?
But let me just try and clear up the issue that you raised. Okay, when we say multiverse, what I think is meant is a region of space-time from a Big Bang. And in inflationary cosmology, as it's currently understood, most models of inflation tell you that our Big Bang is not the only Big Bang, that there are many Big Bangs, and therefore they each create their own sort of what we call bubble or pocket universe.
With a bubble within a bubble?
Yes. So
how many bubbles?
There would be an infinite number.
Can bubbles occur within the bubbles?
It's believed that there would be an infinite number. Yes.
And none of them collided?
Like the same.
Okay, so remember that they're inside an inflating space. No, we're not saying none of them collided. In fact, it's inevitable.
They're inside an inflating space.
It's inevitable. There will be collisions. The issue is whether you would see
There could be a universe inside you.
Is that what you believe?
Yeah. No, I don't say that.
With that patch of space.
Why can't there be a universe inside me?
Because by what we mean by inside is a region of space-time that you're in. This would be a separate region of space-time. So the very phrase inside doesn't necessarily have a meaning.
Oh, wow, this is deep.
Yeah.
So what you're saying now, so this patch of space we're in, the time exists or not?
There isn't a way to time. See, in relativity, there's something called a conformal time and a Lorentzian time. That these have different meanings. There are different notions of time. So, and
what you believe, mate.
Well, I believe in relativity, yes. So you can't say there is time, but you can't necessarily say that one bubble being born is necessarily before or after, because space and time can translate into each other in relativity in non-intuitive ways. That's why I said we shouldn't use our intuition.
So this time,
relativity is not intuitive.
So this time that exists within the patch of space that we can observe.
Yes.
You're saying outside of the patch of space we can observe, there's another universe.
There may be.
That has its own time different to this time.
Yeah. They're space-like separated.
Why do you believe that?
Well, that's even true within this universe. In this universe, there's no notion of universal simultaneity. That's true. Forget the multiverse. If multiverse turns out not to be true, it's still the case that there isn't a universal time in the universe.
Oh, there isn't?
No. The time is observer dependent. It depends how fast you're moving, depends where you are in a gravitational field. So, for example, if you're on the edge of a black hole, your time stands still. If you're going at the speed of light, your time stands still. You don't have a passage
So this idea that the universe is 14.5 billion years old,
13.8.
Yeah, you're saying this is
That's
wrong.
for us. We measure it as 13.8.
Do you believe that that's true or not?
Yes. When we say universe old, that's how much time has happened since the Big Bang. But it's not wrong to assume that the Big Bang was necessarily the beginning. So when we say the universe is 13.8 billion years old, that's what we mean. It's how much time has elapsed since the Big Bang. And we define the Big Bang, and we define the Big Bang as an evolution from a hot, dense state. And when did the hot, dense state come about? When inflation ended. So actually inflation happens before the Big Bang, not afterwards.
So you believe time existed before the Big Bang?
It may have done so, yes.
Well, that's good to hear.
Yes.
Did you hear that, atheists?
Yes, there are a lot of atheists that make completely wrong statements.
That does allow causality before the Big Bang?
It does.
Oh, fantastic.
Yes.
Oh, brilliant.
It does. It's certainly possible. The universe has always existed. Certainly, and many... What I do is I've interviewed all the top... Well, not all. Many of the leading cosmologists in the field. We've just done a film with Stephen Hawking. We've worked with Roger Penrose. We've worked with Alan Guth, who invented inflationary cosmology.
You told Stephen Hawking he's wrong?
No.
You said he was wrong?
No.
You did.
What did I say?
You said Roger Penrose and Stephen Hawking admit that they're wrong about singularity.
No. No. Well, okay. Hawking himself
admits the singularity is not true now.
He's been saying that for about 30 years.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
He doesn't believe in singularity, Stephen Hawking's?
Correct. And it's his theorem. They're called Penrose-Hawking theorems. I just made a film with him about what he thinks replaces the singularity. If you go on YouTube, search Skydive Film.
Okay. Skydive Film, is that you?
That's me. And we have a film series called Before the Big Bang. We've made 5 of these films so far, and there's more on the way.
You don't say I don't know a lot, do you?
In the films, I don't say we don't know a lot. There are some times where we do say that.
It's a fair point, because I've heard everything about you, Phil. I've heard Phil's the man. Phil's the man who studied cosmology, and it's fantastic.
I'm not an expert in cosmology. I've interviewed
and I'll be honest with you, I've not spoken to an atheist that says don't know just as much as you. I really don't.
Okay.
Whereas I was expecting the answers.
I'm sorry, we don't have...
No, but here's the thing, you see. I'm not asking again, most of my questions have not been what you know. It's what you believe, mate.
Well, I know, but there are statements where I just don't have a firm belief. Like you asked me, does the universe infinitely big or finite? I don't have a firm belief because...
But you also then stated it doesn't matter whether it's finite or infinite.
Depends what you mean by does it matter.
Would it change anything?
Probably not.
Really?
Well, it might change something. It does change some things. Like, one of the difficulties in an infinite universe is calculating probabilities. In an infinite universe, everything that's possible is guaranteed to happen.
And a finite universe, does it require a cause?
I don't think necessarily, no.
Really?
Because to me, this is where we were having a conversation. To me, when I look at causes, I see that they're things that happen in time.
Yeah, you said time existed before the Big Bang.
Yes, but if the universe is... It depends what you mean by finite. Do you mean finite in space or finite in time?
Finite in time.
Okay, if it's finite in time, then there isn't a moment before the Big Bang.
So do you believe the universe is finite in time or not?
I don't have a belief there. It might be, it might not be.
If it is finite in time, because you don't know,
correct.
So possibility it's finite in time.
It's possible. It's certainly possible. I certainly don't say it couldn't be.
If it's finite in time, does it require a cause?
I don't see that it does, because to me, causality, from what we understand of causality, causes happen before effects. So if there was a first moment of time, right, then the notion of causality seems to be a problematic one, shall we say, because there wasn't a before for the cause to happen again.
So then your response really should be the universe can't be finite in time because causality can't occur.
No, I wouldn't say it can't be finite in time, but if it was finite in time, then I don't say that it must have had some prior cause, because the notion of prior...
So you're then saying...
doesn't have a meaning if it has a beginning.
So what you're saying is that if the universe is finite in time...
A reflection in the glass, right? Some photons are going through that glass and some are bouncing off it. But their photons are they're all the same. So you can ask the question, what causes...
Say that again, sorry. What does that mean?
When you look at...
I look at a pane of glass.
Pane of glass, you see a reflection in the glass. Right. Some photons are going through the glass.
Some photons?
Yes.
Photons from where?
From wherever the light source was.
Right. The sun, for example.
Right. Sun, wherever the light source was.
Right. Some photons are going through the glass.
Okay. So some are reflecting back on you.
What's causing the photons?
Now, that's... What's causing them?
Sun.
That's not issue. Is not what causing the photons. The issue is what causes one photon to go through the glass and one not to. And as far as we can tell in quantum mechanics, there is no cause for that.
But there's cause for photons, isn't there?
Yes, but there isn't a cause for why some go through and some don't.
No, there's not a reason why. It's not
or even. I mean, to be honest, we don't have time to go into the depths of quantum theory.
Every example you've used required a cause.
Okay.
Photons required the sun.
But yes, but But which one's going through, or which one's...
That's different. That's the reason why they're going through and why they're not.
No. It's okay.
What's allowing some to go through and what's preventing others?
There are events in quantum mechanics which may not have causes. There are different interpretations, so we don't know for sure.
Is that because we don't understand?
Exactly, we don't understand.
It's not as simple as we just don't understand it. Really? There are reasons to think there are not causes.
Name something that in quantum mechanics that you can prove doesn't have a cause.
I can't say it. I'm not going to say it proves doesn't have a cause, because as I told
so it could have a cause.
As I told you, there are different interpretations in quantum mechanics, and some of them are causal and some aren't.
Can you name anything that you believe in quantum mechanics isn't caused by anything?
I'm not going to say that because I don't know what is the right interpretation of quantum mechanics, but it's certainly conceivable and it's certainly reasonable to look at quantum mechanics. And so, for example, Alex Valenkin is a cosmologist quoted by theists all the time because he said that he had a proof for the universe having a beginning, and he says quantum mechanics does not have causes. When radioactive particle decay is not a causal event. Okay, that when a radioactive particle decays or not decays,
it's not a cause.
He says that's an uncaused.
So I asked him the same question: what caused the decay?
No, but you were using a different context, because what we say, the uncaused moment, is not the decay itself; it's which particle decays and which. Because only half of them decay, and the other half don't.
No, that would say why.
And they're all the same. They're all the same.
No, there's something changing. Right? There's something there, isn't there? We just don't know what it is.
No, of course. Okay. Look, we're not going to go into all the details of quantum mechanics. We don't have time. All I would say is, all I want to say is, read up about it, and the notion that causality breaks down in quantum the notion that causality breaks down in quantum mechanics is I think a reasonable one. I'm not saying it's definitely right, so I'm not going to prove things don't have causes, because I don't necessarily believe that. All I'm saying is it's a reasonable thing to suggest, and it's not something that's fringe or not mainstream physics.
I get you.
Go ahead. If I could just ask just something that's slightly... When you're talking about the photons, some of them go through and some of them bounce back.
Yes.
So far, in your understanding, and according to the latest scientific theories, what are the reasons for this? Do you have
it's
any
random? There is no reason.
These random. So there's no causes.
So it appears random
to them.
No, it's not just that there appears random. You can do statistical tests on things for randomness. And they pass statistical tests for randomness.
Right. And that's how you've just deemed them to be random.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's after 7.
Oh, fuck. I need to get going, guys. Listen, we've had a very interesting chat. Maybe we'll talk again. No, it's fine. That's fine. I know. We all get excited. I get like that sometimes too.
This is how I am.
That's fine. Can I make a quick...
That was a good discussion.
But I genuinely wanted to... The questions I've asked you...
Yeah, no,
I'm not one of these people who has tricky questions to make you feel... I genuinely want to hear
they felt like genuine questions.
Because I spoke to atheists so many times.
No, a lot of them talk bullshit. I want to say, apologise, but there are lots of atheists that talk bullshit.
But I will reiterate this.
Because they're human beings, and all human beings talk bullshit.
But I never expected you to say don't know so many times.
I'm sorry, but we don't know.
And I agree. But when you don't know something, you have no authority to say someone else is wrong about that same thing. That's all I say.
I agree.
Good man.
I agree. I totally agree with that. I'm not saying...
Take care. Nice to speak to you.
Can I have a look at the YouTube channel?
Skydive Phil.
The thing that says before the Big Bang. And I... That. And can I suggest one other thing? Watch the debate between a theologian, William Lane
Something behind you this.
and Sean Carroll. William Lane Craig and Sean Carroll. Google that debate, because it's a really interesting debate.
William Lane Craig's Christian, isn't he?
He is a Christian, and Sean Carroll's an atheist. But they talk about a lot of these issues, and it's a very good debate. They're both guys are very knowledgeable, but Sean Carroll's a professional cosmologist.
But I maintain if the universe is finite in time, it has a beginning.
I agree with that.
And I maintain that everything we know of that has a beginning is contingent on something for that beginning.
But that's only because there's a prior moment in time. It's only because there's an arrow of time.
No, it's because everything that begins has a...
Have you seen anything begin that didn't have a prior moment in time?
No.
Not within the universe.
Not
right?
The universe. That would then indicate that.
Exactly. So you don't know what would happen if there's no prior moment in time.
This is that point about there being a non-limiter on our understanding of other causes.
Yeah.
So not saying that everything has a natural explanation. Now that's a bridge that we're not going to cross.
That's what we see, because that would then deem, if there was a cause of the universe, prior to time, then that cause has to be supernatural. Phil, it's been beautiful.
All right. Guys, it's really nice. Very good. Thank you. It's hard to find anyone around here that's not a shouty.
To read the Quran.
I have read the Quran. I've read different translations. No, I hear very rarely, I'm afraid. Do you want to message me on YouTube?
Yeah, well,
Have a look at my channel, send me a message, and it'll be nice to have a discussion. I think that was really good. All right, thank you very much.
my pleasure, thank you. So that was a really great discussion with Phil. We covered a huge variety of topics, going from we started off talking about the problem of evil, and we had a very interesting discussion about is evil necessary or not, and what are the attributes of God that are related to this. And really, Phil was using a really a Christian-based argument in that God is all good and all knowledgeable and all powerful, and therefore there shouldn't be evil on the earth. And we were sort of explaining that free will necessitates there being some sort of moral choices to be made, and morality means that there can be some things that are good and some things that are bad that are happening by necessity, and they can be resulted even because of that. And then also we spoke about looking at the problem of evil in the context of time, and the fact that the time that we have on the earth in the theistic understanding is a very finite period of time, and then actually we have a hereafter which is infinite into the future, eternal into the future, and therefore in the context of the overarching period of time, this would be a very small, insignificant period of suffering if there was any. And then the conversation moved on a little bit. We started talking a little bit about science. Quite a good, interesting discussion. Reasons for believing that in God, for example, came up. And actually, just before that, we spoke about the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the fact that the Quran itself is something that the Prophet Muhammad couldn't have produced because he himself was illiterate. And we looked into how you approach history, and the approach that Phil was taking was really high skepticism about sources that were Islamic, simply because they were Islamic. Whereas actually, when you do history, the point I was trying to make is that you have to go with the knowledge and the writings and the recordings of those people to understand that. And if you want to develop a contrary idea to their claims of history, is then to produce other sources outside of that for them. And then we spoke about science. Science was a fascinating topic. We spoke about, we raised many things. We talked about the the Kalam cosmological argument. We mentioned very briefly consciousness and also evolution over a certain period of time that we have to create the diversity that we see now. We didn't get to cover all of those topics, but it was a really interesting discussion. But actually we saw a lot of real uncertainty about what we do know, and from the atheistic perspective, and then not holding any firm positions at all, but using that as a basis to then deny other people their own stances. Fascinating discussion. I'm sure it will continue. Keep watching. Assalamu alaikum.